They broke the rarest soul they'll ever know. Now let life break them. There are souls in this world so rare, so quietly powerful that most people will never even recognize their worth until it's gone. And when these rare souls are broken, not by accident, but by betrayal, by cruelty, by cold calculation, something shifts in the order of life itself. You don't just hurt someone like that and walk away unchanged. Because life watches, life listens, and life keeps score. But the one they shattered was not just another person, it was a spirit forged in truth, in loyalty, in depth. And now that they've played with what was sacred, it is no longer you they must fear, it is the consequences they invited when they misjudged the value of what they destroyed. Rarity is never recognized by the unworthy. The world is loud, chaotic, and filled with noise that distracts people from what truly matters. In that kind of world, rarity often goes unnoticed, not because it lacks brilliance, but because most people no longer have the eyes to see it. A rare soul is not loud. It doesn't boast. It doesn't try to be seen. Instead, it offers itself quietly through loyalty, depth, compassion, and unwavering presence. These are not traits that the average person recognizes as valuable until they've been lost. And once they're gone, the silence they leave behind echoes louder than all the noise that was once around them. The problem is not with the rare soul. The problem lies in the blindness of those who encounter it. People project their own limitations onto others. They assume that kindness comes from weakness. They believe that patience means ignorance. They interpret gentleness as naivety. So when a rare soul shows up, one who listens instead of reacts, gives instead of takes, forgives instead of retaliates, the unworthy don't see brilliance. They see something they can control, something they can use, something that won't fight back. But that's where they make their first mistake, underestimating the quiet power that lives beneath a rare soul's surface. Because rarity isn't just in what they give, it's in what they endure, it's in their restraint, it's in their silence. A rare soul knows it could destroy someone with truth, but chooses not to. It knows it could walk away at any moment, but decides to stay because its commitment means something. That level of loyalty is not weakness, it's discipline, it's emotional strength, it's moral clarity. And only those with similar depth can recognize it for what it is. To the unworthy, such a soul is inconvenient. It challenges their chaos with calm. It holds up a mirror to their dishonesty with steady truth. It doesn't play games, it doesn't manipulate, and it doesn't need attention. And because of that, it cannot be controlled. And control is what the unworthy crave most. When they can't bend someone to their will, when their tactics stop working, they begin to tear that person down. They start criticizing what they once praised. They mock what they used to depend on, not because the rare soul changed, but because they couldn't extract any more benefit from them. And so the breaking begins, the betrayal, the withdrawal, the disrespect, slowly at first and then all at once. Not because the rare soul deserved it, but because it became a threat. A reminder of everything the other person could never be, that depth, that consistency, that quiet moral compass. It reveals just how shallow the others are, and instead of rising to meet it, they attempt to destroy it. But breaking a rare soul doesn't make it less rare. In fact, it does the opposite. It reveals just how unique it always was, because even in heartbreak, the rare soul doesn't become bitter. Even in betrayal, it refuses to lose its humanity. It may grieve, it may fall silent, but it never sinks to the level of those who wronged it. That kind of strength can't be taught. It can't be bought. It's forged through years of self-reflection, suffering, healing, and choosing again and again to be better, not bitter. And here lies the great irony. While the unworthy believe they've succeeded in breaking someone, they've actually broken their only connection to something sacred. They've thrown away a gift they'll never find again, one that could have walked with them through storms, stood with them in silence, and believed in them even when they didn't believe in themselves. That is the kind of soul you don't get twice in a lifetime. Yet they treated it like it was replaceable, like it was just another person in a sea of many. What they don't realize is that people like that don't come in crowds. They are not part of the noise. They are the rare music in the middle of it. And when that music goes silent, the world becomes colder, emptier, and harder to survive in. Eventually, the weight of that loss catches up to them, not through some dramatic moment, but in the quiet hours, in the stillness of the night, in the middle of ordinary days, in the loneliness that grows even when they're surrounded by people. That's when it hits them. What they lost, who they lost, and who they'll never be. The truth is, people don't lose rare souls because the rare ones left. They lose them because they broke them, or thought they did. And in doing so, exposed their own inability to value what mattered most. The rare soul didn't walk away to punish them. It walked away to preserve what was left of its dignity. And from that moment on, it is no longer the rare soul who suffers. It is the unworthy who must live with the realization that they had something extraordinary in their hands and let it slip away out of ignorance, pride, or fear. And life, as it always does, will take its time, but it will teach them the cost of not recognizing gold when it was quietly placed in their palms. The destruction of the innocent marks the beginning of their own decline. There's a sacred weight to innocence that most people don't understand until it's already gone. Not the naivety of inexperience, but the conscious choice to be kind in a cruel world. The decision to trust when trust has become a currency most exploit. The willingness to believe in goodness even when surrounded by betrayal. That kind of innocence is not ignorance. It's strength in its purest form. But when people encounter it, they often see it as something they can manipulate, mold, or use to their advantage. They see the innocent soul as someone who won't fight back, someone who will keep giving even when they're being taken for granted. So they begin to take. They test boundaries. They push limits. They drain what was freely given and never stop to think about the cost. They don't pause to ask, what happens when I cross a line I can't return from? Because they assume the innocent will always be there, that they'll always forgive, always stay. But that's the illusion, not of the innocent, but of the one who takes them for granted. Innocence is not infinite. It has limits. It has walls, though it may take time for them to rise. And when those walls finally do go up, they're not made of bitterness, they're made of wisdom. Experience changes people. Being broken doesn't always make someone vengeful, but it always makes them different. And that difference is the price of someone else's carelessness. When someone deliberately tries to destroy an innocent soul through betrayal, manipulation, cruelty, or deception, they don't just harm the other person. They set something in motion they can't stop. Because life doesn't ignore the breaking of what was once whole. It observes. It responds. And over time, it begins to return what was sent out. The one who broke the innocent often walks away without guilt. At first. They convinced themselves that the damage they caused was justified, that the other person was too sensitive, too trusting, too emotional. But they don't realize that the conscience they silence today will begin to speak louder tomorrow. Not in grand moments of regret, but in subtle waves of discomfort that creep in when they least expect it. Life doesn't rush. It teaches slowly. It reveals truth not always through punishment, but through exposure. And over time, the person who thought they won, who thought they escaped, begins to experience a different kind of loss. A loss of peace, a loss of joy, a loss of connection. They try to recreate what they once had with the person they destroyed, but it never feels the same. Because they weren't just close to someone, they were close to something sacred. And now that connection is severed, they'll search for it in faces, in relationships, in distractions, and never find it again. The innocent soul, though wounded, doesn't remain broken. It goes quiet. It retreats to rebuild. It reflects, heals, and evolves. But in that evolution, it learns. It learns what to protect, who to trust, how to guard the parts of itself that were once so freely given. And though it may still carry compassion, it no longer carries naivety. It no longer carries naivety. It no longer makes excuses for those who hurt it. It no longer allows its silence to be mistaken for acceptance. The one who caused the harm, however, begins to descend, not always publicly, often privately, in the form of missed peace, subtle guilt, relationships that feel empty, and patterns that repeat no matter how much they try to escape them. Because what they broke was not just a person, it was a mirror, a reflection of what they could have become had they chosen growth over ego, humility over pride. There's something tragic about the way life operates. It gives us moments of grace, chances to change, opportunities to recognize the value of what stands before us. But when we ignore those chances, when we crush the very people sent to help us rise, life has no choice but to teach us through loss. And sometimes that loss is permanent. It is not karma in a mystical sense, it is reality, cause and effect. When you destroy someone who only ever wanted to see you win, you remove one of the few lights guiding your path. You remove clarity. You lose access to sincerity, to genuine connection, to the kind of trust you can't buy back once it's gone. And that loss is not always loud, but it is deep. It shows up in ways you can't explain, in restlessness, in dissatisfaction, in a quiet voice that keeps asking, what if I hadn't done that? Who would I be now? The destruction of the innocent is the beginning of a long decline, not just in life circumstances, but in the soul. Because hurting someone pure doesn't make you powerful. It reveals how lost you already were. And the further you walk away from that purity, the more disconnected you become from who you were meant to be. But by the time they realize that truth, the one they broke is already far ahead, not in revenge, but in transformation. The pain changed them, yes, but it made them wiser, stronger, more discerning. And while the one who inflicted the wound is left haunted by what they destroyed, the innocent one has already become someone new, someone who no longer needs to be understood by those who never deserved to know them in the first place. Betraying a rare soul doesn't free you, it binds you. Betrayal is often misunderstood. People think that walking away from someone who would have done anything for you is liberation, that lying to someone who trusted you gives you power, that deceiving someone who loved you without conditions is just another chapter closed. But that's not how the human psyche works, and it's certainly not how life works. When you betray a rare soul, one of honesty, loyalty, and depth, you don't set yourself free. You shackle yourself to the very consequences you believe you've escaped. The rare soul is not just another person. It's not someone who wandered into your life to fill space. It's someone who saw you, the real you, behind your defenses, your patterns, your wounds. And despite all that, they chose to stay. They chose to believe in your better side, even when you couldn't believe in it yourself. That kind of presence is rare, not because it's impossible to find, but because most people aren't ready to receive it. And when they finally do, they often don't know how to hold it. So instead of rising to meet the standard that soul calls them toward, they retreat, they sabotage, they betray, not always dramatically, sometimes through subtle disloyalty, broken promises, or emotional manipulation, sometimes through silence, distance, or avoidance. But betrayal doesn't always need a grand act. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of trust done by someone who knows exactly how much their presence meant and weaponized it anyway. But what they don't realize is this: you can't betray a rare soul and remain untouched. The memory of what you've done will follow you, not because they haunt you, but because the version of you that existed in their eyes, the one they believed in, is now gone. And the weight of living below that standard becomes heavier with time. At first it may feel like freedom, like a burden lifted, but eventually life catches up. And it doesn't always punish with force, it punishes with clarity. That clarity often comes in the quiet, in the reflection, in the late nights when the noise dies down and there's nowhere left to run. It comes in the realization that you had something unrepeatable, someone who would stood beside you through your darkest moments, and you broke that bond for reasons you barely understand now. Maybe it was fear, maybe ego, maybe an old wound that told you you weren't worthy of something so real, but the reason doesn't matter as much as the result. The bridge is gone, and with it, the one person who would have helped you cross it. And here's the paradox. The person you betrayed may grieve. They may feel pain, but over time they heal, they grow, they transform. Because rare souls don't stay broken. They evolve. They alchemize the betrayal into wisdom, into boundaries, into clarity. They learn who deserves their time and who only wanted their light. And while they rise, the one who betrayed them stays stuck, not always visibly, but emotionally, spiritually, internally, because guilt is a slow companion. It doesn't shout, but it stays. You don't just betray someone like that and walk into the next relationship whole. You carry fragments of what you broke. You bring shadows into new rooms. You find yourself repeating patterns, but without the same grace on the other end. Because not everyone will be like the one you lost. Not everyone will forgive as easily. Not everyone will see the best in you before you've earned it. And when you finally realize that, when the comparisons start creeping in, when you recognize that what you had was far deeper than what you now chase, that's when the bind tightens. You begin to crave the peace you once had, the conversations, the understanding, the trust that didn't need constant proving. And that craving turns to regret, not just for what you did, but for who you became in the process. People often think that betrayal puts an end to something, but really it begins a cycle of restlessness, of looking for wholeness in people who aren't capable of giving it, a cycle of disconnection, of performing intimacy rather than experiencing it. Because once you've betrayed real love, false versions of it never feel quite right. They may distract you, but the rare soul doesn't return not out of spite, but out of self-respect. They know now that they cannot offer their depth to someone who proved they couldn't carry it. They don't hate you. They may even wish you well, but they understand something you never did, that loyalty must be mutual, or it becomes a slow form of self-betrayal. And so, while they rebuild their world with stronger foundations, you are left haunted by the fragments of what you broke, not because you are cursed, but because you are finally aware of what it meant, aware of who they were, aware of who you could have been had you honored what was sacred instead of trying to control it. That awareness is the chain, not punishment from them, not revenge from life, but the natural consequence of waking up too late. And it is not freedom. It is the price of a door you closed with your own hands, never knowing it would be the last one that led to something real. What they took lightly now becomes the weight that crushes them. Some people only value something once it's gone, not because it lacked worth while it was there, but because their vision was too clouded by pride, entitlement, or distraction to see what stood before them. And the tragedy is not just in the loss, it's in the realization that what they once dismissed, ignored, or took for granted was the very thing they now can't stop thinking about. The weight of that truth doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, and when it hits, it doesn't knock, it suffocates. When someone has been loved by a rare soul, they have been touched by something most people go their entire lives without. To be cared for without manipulation, to be forgiven without being begged, to be understood without explanation, this is not normal. It is sacred. And when that kind of love is received casually, it reveals more about the person receiving it than the one giving it. It shows a heart unready to be held accountable, a mind that confuses unconditional love with unconditional tolerance, a spirit too immature to carry what it has been entrusted with. At first, they're comfortable. They expect your kindness. They predict your forgiveness. They assume your loyalty is limitless. And so they push further. They say what they shouldn't. They do what they once promised they never would. They test how far they can go, how much they can take before you break. But the rare soul, by nature, is long-suffering. It endures far beyond what most people would tolerate, not out of weakness, but out of hope. Hope that the other person will awaken to the damage they're causing. Hope that love might still soften what life has hardened in them. But everything has a breaking point, even the strongest heart, even the kindest soul, even the most forgiving spirit. And when that moment arrives, when the rare soul finally chooses to walk away, it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not revenge, it's resolve, the kind of quiet decision that comes from exhaustion and clarity, finally meeting in the same room. And for the one who took them lightly, that silence is deafening, because now there are no more explanations, no more reassurances, no more open doors. And what once felt guaranteed suddenly becomes a memory that replays itself in moments of loneliness, during conversations with others that lack substance, in the hollow spaces of shallow relationships. What they once called too much now feels like everything I wish I had back. That weight grows heavier with time, not because the rare soul wants it to, they've moved on, they're not looking back, but because the contrast becomes unbearable. Once someone has experienced true love, true patience, and true presence, the counterfeit versions that follow can't compare. No matter how attractive the new faces may be, no matter how exciting the distractions, there's always something missing, something that once was taken lightly and now lives as an ache just beneath the surface. This is where life begins to teach, not through immediate consequences, but through a slow unraveling of what they thought they understood. Relationships become more transactional, emotions become more guarded, trust becomes harder to feel, and they start realizing it wasn't love they were running from, it was accountability. Because to be loved by someone rare is to be seen fully, and that kind of visibility can be terrifying to someone still hiding from themselves. So instead of growing, they fled. Instead of healing, they deflected. Instead of cherishing, they consumed. And now, the weight of what they mishandled grows into a quiet torment, not one loud enough for others to see, but sharp enough to disrupt their peace. They start asking themselves questions they can't answer. Why did I walk away from that? Why did I treat them like they didn't matter? Who have I become? And the rare soul? They're not waiting for an apology. They're not hoping for closure. They've already found it, not in the other person's remorse, but in their own growth, in their own healing, in their recognition that being taken lightly does not make them less valuable. In fact, it makes them more rare, because the world is full of people who want depth, but are terrified of drowning in it. And so the tables turn, not out of vengeance, but through time. The one who gave everything now lives lighter, freer, clearer. And the one who once felt in control now feels the absence of what they never took the time to understand. That absence becomes a shadow, one they carry into every future connection, a quiet echo whispering, "You had something beautiful, and you let it go." Or they may try to replace you, mimic what you gave, recreate the moments you once shared, but replicas don't hold the same weight as the original, and they'll know it. They'll feel it every time someone falls short of the standard you set without even trying. What they took lightly has become the weight that crushes them, not because you wanted it that way, but because life has a rhythm that always restores balance. And sometimes that balance arrives not in your suffering, but in their awakening. An awakening that comes too late, when you've already become someone they'll never be close to again. Life has a way of making them feel everything they made you feel. There is a law at work in the human soul that few ever truly understand. It's not written in courtrooms or inscribed in any sacred text, but it governs life all the same. It's the principle that says what you make others feel, especially when they loved you in truth, you will one day feel yourself. Not out of punishment, but out of the deeper justice built into the way life moves. When someone has wounded you deeply, silently, without remorse, they believe in that moment that they've escaped the consequences, but they haven't, not even close. At first, they walk away with ease. They may feel justified, empowered, even proud. They may convince themselves that you were the problem, that your depth was a burden, that your loyalty was control, that your expectations were unreasonable. It's easier that way, easier than facing what really happened. Because facing the truth would mean admitting they mishandled someone who only wanted to see them win, and that truth would dismantle the image they've built of themselves, an image they're desperate to preserve. But life doesn't cooperate with lies. It doesn't bend to self-deception. It waits, patiently, quietly. And over time it begins to reflect back to them the very emotions they once dismissed in you. The confusion you felt when they became distant without warning. One day they'll feel it too, in someone they trust, who suddenly grows cold. The ache you carried when your efforts were unseen, it will revisit them in the silence of being ignored, overlooked, unappreciated, by someone they hoped would understand. Life's justice rarely shows up in a dramatic form. It shows up in the mirror, in the reflection of their own actions coming back to meet them, not as punishment, but as experience. And experience is a more powerful teacher than revenge ever could be. It doesn't seek to destroy them, it seeks to awaken them. And awakenings are rarely comfortable. They are filled with regret, with hindsight, with the painful realization that the very things they did to others are now being done to them. There will come a day when they feel the abandonment they've forced you to carry, the helplessness you wrestled with, when they twisted the truth to fit their narrative, the loneliness that crept in, when your loyalty was met with indifference. All of it returns, not all at once, but in waves, in conversations that feel empty, in relationships that don't last, in moments when they long for something real and can't find it, no matter how far they search. And as they begin to feel these things, they may not connect the dots at first. They may not realize that what they're experiencing is the echo of the pain they caused. But life has a way of circling back with clarity. Eventually the pieces align. They'll remember your face, your voice, the way you stayed, the way you tried, the way you kept showing up even when you were being pushed away. And that memory won't comfort them, it will convict them, not out of cruelty, but because it's the only way they'll truly understand. Meanwhile, you've grown, you've changed, you've healed. You've learned to breathe again in a world that once tried to choke your kindness. You've realized your worth was never determined by their ability to see it. And while they now sit with the consequences of what they did, you sit with the strength of what you overcame. Your pain was not wasted. It was transformed, not into revenge, but into wisdom, into boundaries, into purpose. That's the beauty of how life works. It doesn't just vindicate the wounded, it teaches the ones who wounded them. It humbles the proud. It awakens the careless. And often it does so through the one thing they never expected, feeling the very things they once dismissed as weakness, feeling the same ache they caused, but with no one now willing to stay through it. It is not about gloating. It's not about hoping they suffer. It's about trusting the process of life, trusting that no pain you endured went unnoticed, no tear fell in vain, no silent night spent wondering what you did wrong was wasted. All of it was seen. All of it was stored. And now life returns it, not to you, but to them, so they can finally understand the weight of what they carried so casually. Because life doesn't forget. It doesn't seek revenge, but it does seek balance. And that balance often comes when the emotions they made you feel become the very emotions they can no longer escape. That is how understanding is born, not in words, but in experience. And by the time they understand, you've already become someone they don't have access to anymore. So let life do what it does. Let it teach them. Let it shape them. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to hope they get it. They will. One way or another, they will. Because every feeling you once carried for them, every ounce of confusion, heartbreak, hope, and sorrow will become a lesson carved into their own journey. And in that way, the circle completes not through revenge, but through reality, through truth, through the natural consequence of a heart that refused to value the one thing it may never find again.